Hello everyone and welcome back to Alex Elliott Golf. This week's tip is all about how we can control these hips in order to hit that golf ball further. So the key to why a lot of the big players on tour hit the ball a long way is their ability to separate the upper half and their lower half. And many amateur golfers can't separate their upper and lower half. So firstly, before we talk about how we're going to do this over the golf ball, let's just talk through about that feeling of how we're going to separate the upper and lower half. So let's get in our golf posture, nice and athletic. Now in that golf posture now, I want you to try and make a rotation with your upper half left and right, as we would in the golf swing. Now you'll notice that my hips are staying pretty straight there. Now this is not what would happen in the golf swing. So how are we going to make this more relevant to how we're going to make a good move in the golf swing? So I want you to feel like you sit into your right hip. So you can see I sit into my right hip. I'm getting a nice rotation, sitting into my right hip. There's not too much knee movement across. There's not my knee lifting or foot lifting off the ground, and I'm not swaying. So again, hands across the chest and sit into that right hip. I'm staying in my box. So what do I most commonly see? So talking without a golf club, we're just looking at the body in general, that we'd see a lot of swaying across, the left leg would come up and we'd break this line. So ideally, we'd not break that line. We want to stay in our box and we want to rotate around ourselves. So we're going to sit into the right hip, not break our line, and let's now talk about how we're going to do that with the golf club in our hand. So we've talked about how people sway and break this line when we're moving our golf club during the backswing. So if we show you that with the golf club in our hand, we see a lot of this swaying and then swaying back through this way. So the hips are really not under control at all. They'd look like this and they look like this. So for me, that's not going to be, for one, give you much control, two, and it's not going to give you a lot of power. So how are we going to make sure we get that feeling within the golf swing? So we talked about this line. I want you to imagine, or even in a practice swing, we can leave this here. So I've got that line. I want you to feel like now we rotate and sit into that right hip. So you can see I've stayed within my box. I haven't broken that red line. So I'm rotating back to the target. My hips are moving perfectly. They're stable, they're under control. And then from here, I've got a greater chance of allowing to open them up under control at impact in order to generate a great amount of power. Because if we think about it, and we think about it logically, if I was stood here and my hips were swaying this way and swaying this way, there's not a great chance that I'm going to be very open at impact with the hips and be able to develop that power and that dissociation between the upper and lower half in order to create that power. So we've also talked about what we see about a swaying of our hips in the backswings. But another common theme I see with many of my players and clients is that we have a bit of a reverse pivot. So we do the opposite. The hips don't really move at all and our weight goes the opposite way to what we're swinging. So our weight is travelling towards the target during the backswing. And from there, it's going to be even harder to ensure consistent impact and develop a lot of power. So the moral of this week's video is all about being able to move those hips, arms across the shoulders, under control. So feel like we sit into our right bum cheek. Let's show you that from down the line. So I wouldn't break the line. I'm not reverse pivoting. Hands across the shoulders. You can even do this in the mirror at home. Hands across the shoulders, sit into that right bum cheek. As you can see, my left shoulder's down to the golf ball. I'm making my hips under control. The nice and wide stance, and I'm based into the ground. Turning. Now let's give that a go with a golf club. So we've talked about what we want to see and what we don't want to see in order to control these hips to develop more power. So what we want to see is a wider stance. That's going to give us a solid base, and that's especially with driver. And then from there, we're going to take one little practice again, moving those hips, sitting into that right bum, not breaking that line. So tip number one, wider stance. Tip number two, feel like we sit into your right bum cheek. Let's see if we can give that one a go. So as you can see, it was a nice solid hit. So you're going to ask the question, why are we talking about this? Because this week we're not really giving you a full-on tip like many weeks we had before. This week we're almost talking about what we do and don't want to see within the golf swing. So the reason we want to see these hips under control is, one, to generate power, but also to generate consistency. And with consistency comes being able to sequence the golf swing better and move our body more efficiently. And all in all, the more efficiently we can move our body, the more power we can all get. So the more distance we can achieve off the tee. So let's just summarise again exactly what we're doing. We're not swaying, we're not reverse pivoting, we're feeling like with a wide stance and a solid base, we're sitting into that right bum cheek to keep control of these hips and give us a better chance of opening up into impact and opening up correctly, which is key. So hope you enjoyed this week's tip, or this week's kind of analysis of swings of what we do and don't want to see. Give me a comment down below if you'd like to see a little bit more of this, so a little bit more in depth of how the body is going to move within the golf swing. As always, all that's left for me to do is say, if you've not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button below, and always, thank you for watching.